Tehran, Iran, January 11th, 2012. Dawn breaks over the Alborz Mountains as millions of commuters flood arterial roads in choreographed chaos. In the affluent Sayed Khamdan neighborhood, where nuclear scientists maintain comfortable homes, streets are already congested with traffic, heading toward research facilities scattered across Tehran's northern suburbs. Mostafa Ahmadi Roshan emerges from his residence at 7:42 a.m., following a routine so consistent that anyone watching would have mapped his movements weeks earlier. He is 32 years old, Deputy Director of Commerce at the Natanz Uranium Enrichment Facility, responsible for procuring specialized equipment to refine uranium to levels that international observers insist exceed civilian requirements. His driver holds open the door of a white Peugeot 405. Roshan's wife joins him as the vehicle pulls into traffic, merging with the stream of cars and motorcycles clogging narrow streets. Two motorcyclists maintain position 3 vehicles behind. They wear full-face helmets and dark jackets, indistinguishable from thousands of other riders navigating Tehran's gridlock. Strapped beneath one rider's jacket is a magnetic explosive device weighing approximately 1 kilogram, its shaped charge designed to focus blast energy through a vehicle's door panel. The device will be detonated remotely once attached. The motorcyclists accelerate as traffic slows near an intersection, closing distance with practiced precision. Their movements carry no urgency that would attract attention. They simply navigate traffic as millions of Tehran riders do each morning. This is the 4th time in 2 years that Israeli intelligence has executed this exact pattern. To understand how Tehran's morning commute became a hunting ground for systematic assassination, we must return to when Israel's leadership concluded that Iran's nuclear program posed an existential threat that diplomacy alone could not address. Iran began pursuing nuclear technology in the 1950s under Shah Mohammad Reza Pahlavi, with U.S. and European assistance who saw cooperation as strengthening ties with a strategically positioned ally. The 1979 Islamic Revolution initially suspended the program, but by the mid-1980s it resumed under the framework of technological sovereignty. Through the devastating war with Iraq, Iranian leadership came to view nuclear capability as essential for national security. Through the 1990s and 2000s, Iran rebuilt its infrastructure with assistance from Russia, Pakistan, and North Korea, constructing facilities at Natanz, Isfahan, and Arak that international observers assessed as exceeding civilian energy requirements. The Natanz facility, built partially underground to resist bombardment, housed thousands of centrifuges designed to enrich uranium. Iranian officials insisted the program was purely peaceful. Western intelligence drew different conclusions from the facility's configurations and intercepts of communications between scientists and procurement networks acquiring materials through black market channels. The IAEA began inspections in 2003 after Iran had concealed activities for nearly 2 decades. Inspectors documented undeclared facilities, unexplained traces of highly enriched uranium, and weapons delivery research inconsistent with civilian programs. Iran alternated between cooperation and obstruction. The UN Security Council passed successive resolutions demanding Iran suspend enrichment. Iran refused, citing its rights under the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. By 2009, Israeli intelligence concluded Iran was progressing toward nuclear weapons capability, and the diplomatic window was closing. Mossad sources within Iran's scientific community provided detailed intelligence. Iran possessed sufficient centrifuge capacity to produce weapons-grade uranium within months. Scientists had advanced weapons design knowledge, and the program had reached the stage where military strikes would inflict only temporary setbacks, but could not eliminate knowledge residing in scientists' minds who would simply rebuild elsewhere. Netanyahu convened security cabinet meetings throughout 2009. The discussions paralleled those following the Munich massacre, debates about whether Israel could rely on international pressure or whether survival demanded unilateral action regardless of diplomatic consequences. Military planners presented scenarios for aerial strikes requiring refueling capabilities Israel lacked, operations that would likely trigger regional war and at best delay rather than eliminate the program. Intelligence officials proposed combining cyber sabotage, targeted assassinations, and diplomatic pressure that might achieve similar delays without triggering open conflict. The cyber component was already in development. Stuxnet, a computer worm designed to infiltrate Iran's nuclear facilities and physically damage centrifuges by manipulating operational speeds, was being prepared through Israeli-American intelligence cooperation. The malware would eventually infect approximately 1,000 centrifuges at Natanz, causing them to fail while reporting normal operations. But cyber attacks couldn't eliminate human expertise. That required targeting the scientists whose knowledge made weapons development possible. Mossad compiled individuals whose technical expertise made them irreplaceable. 4 names rose to prominence. Masoud al-Mohammadi was a particle physics professor at Tehran University whose expertise in quantum field theory and neutron behavior made him valuable for understanding nuclear chain reactions and weapons design. Majid Shahriari specialized in nuclear engineering and neutron transport, critical for designing weapons cores that compress fissile material to supercritical density. Dariush Rizanejad worked in electrical engineering with apparent focus on high-voltage switching systems relevant for designing weapons trigger mechanisms, though his contributions remained less clearly documented. Mostafa Ahmadi Roshan supervised commercial operations at Natanz, responsible for procuring specialized materials through networks circumventing international sanctions. These men represented critical nodes whose expertise had taken years to develop. Eliminating them would slow progress, force Iran to divert resources toward replacing expertise, and demonstrate that weapons work carried fatal risks. The decision to pursue assassinations rather than conventional strikes reflected calculations about effectiveness. Bombing facilities would produce limited strategic impact. Iran would rebuild at hardened sites and could justify withdrawing from inspections entirely while rallying nationalist support. Targeted assassinations offered deniability, demonstrated reach without triggering regional war, and addressed the fundamental challenge that nuclear programs depend on human knowledge that cannot be destroyed by conventional weapons, but can be eliminated by killing those who possess it. Netanyahu authorized a comprehensive campaign in late 2009, combining Stuxnet, systematic assassinations, and diplomatic pressure, coordinated with American intelligence who viewed this as preferable to strikes that might draw the U.S. into conflict. Mossad received operational authority to identify methods, recruit assets, and execute eliminations according to timelines balancing tactical opportunity against strategic considerations about spacing attacks to maintain psychological pressure, while avoiding patterns allowing Iranian counterintelligence to adapt effectively. The initial challenge was mapping scientists' routines with sufficient precision to identify vulnerability windows. Unlike military targets, Iranian nuclear scientists operated with surprising freedom. They drove personal vehicles or used drivers employed directly rather than assigned by security services. They maintained consistent schedules dictated by laboratory hours and family obligations. Over 18 months, surveillance teams documented patterns. Al-Mohammadi left his Qataria home at consistent times, walking to his car parked on the street. Shahriari commuted to Shahid Beheshti University, along routes that varied only slightly, usually departing between 7:30 and 8 p.m. when traffic was heaviest. Reza Ain Jad followed routines around his daughter's kindergarten schedule. Roshan traveled between his home and meetings related to Natan's procurement operations. The intelligence picture revealed Iranian security services provided virtually no protection for scientists below senior levels. There were no bodyguards, no armed escorts, no armored vehicles. This lack reflected both resource constraints and apparently genuine belief that Israel would not conduct assassination operations inside Iranian territory. Iranian officials had observed Israeli strikes against Hezbollah leaders in Lebanon and Hamas, commanders in Gaza, but calculated that operations inside Iran proper would represent escalation Israel would avoid. This assessment would prove catastrophically wrong. Tehran's transportation infrastructure provided nearly perfect conditions for the assassinations Mossad envisioned. The city of 8 million depended heavily on vehicles supplemented by millions of motorcycles residents used to navigate chronic congestion. Motorcycles could weave between stalled cars and disappear into traffic flows that made pursuit difficult. The ubiquity meant two riders following a vehicle would attract no attention whatsoever. The weapon system was elegant in its simplicity. Magnetic explosive devices weighing approximately 1 kilogram would be constructed using shaped charge principles, concentrating blast force directionally. The charges would be small enough to conceal beneath motorcycle jackets, but powerful enough to penetrate vehicle doors and kill occupants. The magnetic attachment system used a rare earth magnets bonding instantly to vehicle bodies. The detonation mechanism would be triggered remotely using cell phone signals that operatives could activate from safe distances after confirming proper positioning. Development occurred at Israeli facilities where engineers tested configurations until they achieved design's balancing power, concealability, and reliability. The shaped charges were tested against vehicle mock-ups, matching types Iranian scientists drove. Manufacturing required specialized skills and materials. The explosive compounds, detonators, and sophisticated electronics would be fabricated in Israel, then smuggled into Iran through routes Mossad had developed. These smuggling networks operated through third countries, using commercial shipping, diplomatic pouches from cooperative nations, and overland routes through borders where Iranian customs enforcement was inconsistent. The operational teams presented complex recruitment challenges. Israeli commandos couldn't operate in landlocked Tehran. The assassinations would be executed by assets already inside Iran. Mossad turned to the Mujahideen-e-Khalq, an Iranian opposition organization that had fought against the Islamic Republic since the 1979 revolution and maintained networks inside Iran despite decades of counterintelligence efforts to eliminate them. The group's members possessed intimate knowledge of Iranian society, spoke Farsi natively, understood local customs, and had ideological motivation to conduct operations against the Islamic Republic aligning with Israeli objectives. Israeli intelligence officers made contact with MEK leadership through intermediaries, proposing operational cooperation, providing funding, training, and technical support in exchange for conducting assassinations serving both organizations' interests. The collaboration raised concerns about relying on a group whose political ideology differed significantly from Israel's, but operational necessity overrode reservations. MEK operatives could move through Tehran without attracting attention. Israeli operatives would trigger immediately. Training occurred at facilities outside Iran, where MEK members learned to handle magnetic bombs, practiced motorcycle approaches to moving vehicles, rehearsed attachment techniques until they could place devices in seconds, and drilled extraction procedures through mock-ups of Tehran streets. The training emphasized speed and precision. The entire attachment process needed to occur in under 10 seconds, fast enough that drivers wouldn't have time to react, slow enough that operatives maintained control and ensured devices bonded properly. Israeli trainers emphasized psychological preparation as much as technical skills. The operatives would be killing men, potentially, in front of families, executing assassinations during morning commutes when wives and children might be present. Some operatives expressed ambivalence, questioning whether killing scientists rather than military commanders crossed moral boundaries. The trainers acknowledged the complexity but emphasized that nuclear weapons in Iranian hands posed existential threats, justifying extraordinary measures. The decision to conduct assassinations over 2 years rather than simultaneously reflected calculations about psychological impact versus operational security. Simultaneous strikes would alert Iranian security immediately to patterns, allowing them to implement protective measures, preventing future operations. Spacing assassinations over months would maintain pressure, keep scientists fearful, and allow Mossad to assess Iranian security responses before committing to additional operations. By October 2009, the operational infrastructure was established. MEK operatives were trained and positioned in Tehran under cover identities. Safe houses had been secured. Surveillance assets monitored target scientists' routines. Communication systems allowed Mossad officers outside Iran to authorize operations and receive confirmation. The magnetic bombs had been smuggled into Iran and distributed to cache sites. Mossad confirmed Masoud al-Mohammadi would be the first target. His routine was most predictable, his security posture most vulnerable. Beginning with al-Mohammadi would test Iranian security responses and validate attack methods under operational conditions. The authorization came through encrypted communications in early January 2010. The operation would proceed on January 12th. The method would not involve motorcyclists with magnetic bombs, but rather a booby-trapped motorcycle parked near his home and detonated remotely when he approached his vehicle. This variation reflected site-specific considerations and the desire to test different methodologies. Ali Mohammadi left his Kateriye home at approximately 7:40 a.m. on January 12, 2010, following the same route he had traveled hundreds of times to Tehran University's physics department. The morning was cold. Ali Mohammadi had no bodyguards, no security detail, no protective measures beyond ordinary precautions. A motorcycle was parked on the street approximately 20 meters from where Ali Mohammadi's car sat at the curb. The motorcycle appeared unremarkable, positioned as though its owner had parked it the previous evening. But the motorcycle was a weapon, rigged with explosives connected to a remote detonation system. The device had been placed during the night by operatives who approached on foot and worked quickly to install the bomb and retreat. Ali Mohammadi walked toward his vehicle, carrying a briefcase. He reached his car and began unlocking the driver's side door. The detonation occurred at precisely that moment, the explosive charge converting the motorcycle into shrapnel. The blast killed Ali Mohammadi instantly. The explosion shattered windows in nearby buildings, set fire to Ali Mohammadi's vehicle, and drew police within minutes. Witnesses reported hearing the blast from blocks away. Neighbors emerged to find Ali Mohammadi's body in the street, burning wreckage and chaos as police established cordons. Iranian security services arrived quickly, sealing the area and beginning forensic analysis that would determine the explosion had been triggered remotely and that the sophistication suggested foreign intelligence involvement. The Iranian government's response was confused. Officials couldn't immediately determine whether Ali Mohammadi had been targeted for his nuclear work or for his political activities. He had signed a letter supporting reformist opposition candidates during Iran's contested 2009 election. Some officials suggested the assassination might have been conducted by hardline elements within Iran's own security apparatus. Others argued it suggested foreign intelligence operations. The ambiguity served Israeli interests. If Iranian authorities attributed the killing to internal political violence, they wouldn't implement security measures protecting other nuclear scientists, Even if they suspected foreign involvement, the method made pattern recognition difficult. 10 months passed before the second wave demonstrated the systematic nature of the campaign. On November 29, 2010, two separate teams of motorcyclists executed coordinated assassinations against nuclear scientists commuting through different sectors of Tehran. The attacks occurred within minutes of each other. Both employed the magnetic bomb method that would become the campaign's signature. Majid Shahriari departed his western Tehran home at approximately 7:45 a.m., his wife driving their Peugeot sedan, while Shahriari occupied the passenger seat. Traffic was heavy. Two motorcyclists maintained position several vehicles behind, their presence unremarkable. As traffic slowed approaching an intersection, the motorcyclists accelerated, closing distance to the Peugeot. The rider on the right drew alongside the passenger door, reached beneath his jacket, and in a motion, taking less than 3 seconds, placed the bomb against the door panel. The magnets bonded instantly. The motorcyclists accelerated away, disappearing into traffic. Shahriari may have heard the metallic click when the device attached, may have turned to see the motorcyclist departing, may have had seconds to understand what occurred before detonation. The shaped charge exploded with a sharp crack, directing blast force through the door panel. Shahriari died immediately. His wife survived, though severely injured, the driver's position providing partial protection. The vehicle coasted to a stop. Some witnesses reported seeing motorcyclists near the Peugeot before the explosion, but descriptions were vague and contradictory. By the time police arrived, the motorcyclists were kilometers away, having discarded jackets and helmets and blended into Tehran's vast motorcycle population. At nearly the same moment, in another part of Tehran, an identical attack was executed against Fareydun Abbasi, vice president of the Iranian Atomic Energy Organization. Abbasi was traveling with his wife when motorcyclists approached using the same method. The rider placed a magnetic bomb against the passenger door, the device bonding as the motorcyclists accelerated away. But Abbasi noticed the motorcyclist's behavior, recognized something wrong, and in seconds before detonation, understood they had attached something to his vehicle. He shouted to his wife to stop and simultaneously pushed open the passenger door, throwing himself from the moving vehicle as his wife braked. The magnetic bomb detonated as Abbasi cleared the door, the explosion missing its intended target. Both survived with injuries, becoming the first target to escape alive. The simultaneous attacks eliminated any remaining ambiguity. Iranian security services now understood they faced systematic assassination, that motorcyclists with magnetic bombs represented a repeatable method, and that nuclear scientists were being hunted using tactics exploiting vulnerabilities in Tehran's transportation infrastructure. The government announced emergency security measures, assigned protection details to senior scientists, altered commute routes and schedules, and launched investigations. But adapting security measures to counter motorcycle assassinations proved difficult. Providing every scientist with armored vehicles and escorts would require resources Iran's government couldn't easily allocate. Varying routes and schedules disrupted scientists' work patterns, and critically, the vast number of motorcycles in Tehran traffic meant identifying suspicious riders before they attacked was nearly impossible without intelligence about specific planned operations. Iranian authorities arrested dozens of suspects in months following the November attacks, claiming to have dismantled Mossad networks and captured MEK operatives who had participated in surveillance and logistics. Some arrests may have been genuine. Others likely represented scapegoating. Several suspects would eventually face execution after closed trials providing few details. 8 months passed with no additional attacks. Israeli planners assessed Iranian security responses, evaluating whether enhanced protective measures made continuing the campaign too risky or whether operational adjustments could overcome adaptations. The decision was made to proceed with a third assassination using a tactical variation. On July 23, 2011, Dariush Rezaeinejad was driving through northeast Tehran with his wife and young daughter when motorcyclists approached near the kindergarten where his daughter attended classes. Instead of attaching a magnetic bomb, the riders drew pistols and fired multiple shots through car windows, killing Rezaeinejad while his family witnessed. The shooting took seconds. Rezaeinejad died at the scene, his death witnessed by his wife and daughter in circumstances that would traumatize them permanently. The tactical variation served multiple purposes. It demonstrated operations weren't dependent on a single method, that motorcyclists could execute assassinations using firearms when magnetic bombs were impractical. It tested whether Iranian security had focused protective measures specifically on detecting magnetic bombs while remaining vulnerable to conventional shooting attacks. And it created additional psychological pressure on scientists who now understood they faced multiple types of threats. The targeting of Rezaeinejad also raised questions about target selection criteria. His connection to Iran's nuclear weapons program was less clearly documented than other victims. Iranian officials claimed he had no involvement with nuclear work, describing him as an electronics engineer working on conventional projects. Western intelligence assessments suggested he may have been involved in designing high-voltage trigger systems for nuclear devices, but evidence was circumstantial. His killing near his daughter's kindergarten, with his child witnessing, created particularly strong criticism from observers questioning whether assassination operations should occur in locations where children were present. 5 months later, on January 11, 2012, the campaign returned to its signature method with Roshan's assassination. As traffic slows near an intersection in Sayed Khandan, the motorcyclists accelerate, closing distance to Roshan's white Peugeot. The right rider draws alongside the passenger door, reaches beneath his jacket, and retrieves the magnetic explosive device. In a fluid motion perfected through training, he places the device against the door panel. The magnets bond instantly with a soft click. The motorcyclists accelerate immediately, weaving between vehicles. The shaped charge explodes approximately 10 seconds after attachment, the blast force penetrating the door panel with lethal effect. Roshan dies instantly. His wife survives with serious injuries. The driver struggles to maintain control as the vehicle coasts to a stop. The motorcyclists continue through traffic, their departure unremarkable. Within blocks, they discard helmets and jackets, transforming their appearance. They separate, each heading to different safe locations. The attack pattern was identical to Shahryari's assassination 14 months earlier, evidence that despite Iranian security measures and investigations, Israeli operations could still execute assassinations using tactics relying on Tehran's traffic density and motorcycle ubiquity. The assassination of Roshan marked the campaign's end. 4 scientists were dead, 1 survived, and Israeli intelligence had demonstrated capacity to conduct systematic assassination operations inside Tehran, despite Iranian security measures and international pressure. But continuing faced diminishing returns against increasing risks. Iranian security had adapted enough that subsequent operations would face higher probability of failure. The scientists most critical were now protected by enhanced security measures, and the diplomatic situation made continuing visible operations politically problematic for Israel's relationship with allies pursuing diplomatic engagement with Iran. Iranian authorities arrested dozens more suspects after Roshan's death, claiming to have dismantled networks and imprisoned MEK collaborators. Several faced execution after trials providing minimal public information. Whether arrests reached actual operatives remained unclear. The international response followed predictable patterns. Iran condemned the killings as state terrorism, demanding UN action. Western governments issued carefully calibrated statements expressing concern while avoiding explicit condemnation of actions they privately viewed as serving strategic interests. Israel maintained its policy of neither confirming nor denying involvement, though senior officials made statements suggesting satisfaction with outcomes disrupting Iranian nuclear progress without triggering regional war. The campaign's impact on Iran's nuclear timeline was significant but not decisive. Loss of specialized expertise created capability gaps requiring time to fill. Combined with Stuxnet's destruction of centrifuges and intensifying sanctions, the assassinations contributed to delays buying additional time for diplomatic efforts. But the program continued. Iranian engineers eventually replaced damaged equipment and lost expertise, and by 2013, Iran was approaching weapons capability despite multi-year disruption. The moral calculus remained deeply contested. Defenders argued that scientists working on weapons programs accepted risks by choosing to participate in projects designed to threaten Israel's survival, that targeting individuals represented more discriminate force than military strikes killing civilians, and that preventing proliferation justified extraordinary measures including assassination. Critics countered that targeting civilian scientists established dangerous precedents, that killing men before families contradicted claims about discriminate violence, and that campaigns failed to stop programs while generating nationalist backlash, strengthening regime support. The killing of Reza Ahmadinejad outside his daughter's kindergarten particularly drew condemnation as crossing boundaries even covert operations should respect. The operatives who placed bombs knowing families might be present, who shot Reza Ahmadinejad outside his daughter's kindergarten, who created widows and orphans, would live with those actions regardless of whether they believed operations were justified. The intelligence officers who authorized each killing, who selected targets and approved methods, defended the campaign's necessity while recognizing its moral complexity. What remains certain is that between January 2010 and January 2012, Israeli intelligence demonstrated that systematic assassination campaigns could reach targets deep inside adversary territory through local assets, innovative weapons, and exploitation of urban infrastructure, providing both cover and concealment. Whether these assassinations achieved strategic objectives sufficient to justify execution remains debated. The operations delayed Iran's nuclear program, but didn't stop it. They demonstrated Israeli reach, but also revealed limits of what assassination campaigns could accomplish against state-level nuclear programs with institutional depth and resources to overcome personnel losses. The magnetic bombs, the motorcyclists who vanished into traffic, the families who lost husbands and fathers during morning commutes, all became part of a narrative about costs. Nations accept pursuing security against existential threats. Whether this represents necessary action in defense of national survival or tragic miscalculation. Achieving temporary gains at disproportionate moral cost. Whether it demonstrates resolve or reveals violence's limits as policy, remains unresolved for those who plan these operations and evaluate their consequences. The campaign stands as a case study in targeted assassination as statecraft, effective at eliminating individuals and creating temporary disruption, but ultimately insufficient to prevent determined adversaries from pursuing strategic goals when institutional knowledge and resources extend beyond any individual's irreplaceable expertise.